Hello and welcome to Dad and Swebb Talk Sports. I'm Swebb.
And I'm Dad.
And we are the dad and daughter duo talking about all of our favorite sports moments from the week. Dad, top of the morning to you.
Top of the morning. Top of the morning, Swebb.
Now, this is our second time recording. It's actually nighttime on March 17th, 2025, St. Patrick's Day. But someone was flailing their arms too much, and his part wasn't recorded. So here we are. Hair's already up, folks. I was wearing this nice little Miami jacket. Right on trend for the day. Here we are.
So how did you wind up with a Jets sweatshirt on?
This is the sweatshirt that I wear when I'm laying on the couch watching TV. Luckily, it has green in it. So, I may have been wearing my Miami jacket earlier, but that's probably the last time for the next few seasons, I guess, until the fall that I can really wear that and have it be relevant, because they are not sniffing the NCAA tournament.
No, they're not.
But you know who is?
Who?
The UNC Tar Heels. They've made it in by the skin of their teeth. They, according to the selection committee on Sunday, were the last team to get in.
Yep, I heard. That's what the
How
talk
are you
was.
feeling about
I
things,
think
Dad?
everybody heard that today.
Now, everyone has been up in arms. Carolina has people in tears today, in their feelings completely.
That's because everybody was led to believe one thing for the last 3 months. And then last night, after they selected all the teams, people from the selection committee came out and added a whole lot of different metrics that nobody had heard of before. And,
Okay, so let's...
And the head of the selection committee is the athletic director of North Carolina. So
let's talk through things.
Yeah.
Now, we had talked all season long about how average, how mid, as the kids say, that UNC was this season. They just don't have as much talent as we're used to seeing on UNC basketball teams. They did not spend a dime, it seems like, on NIL, while all of the schools in the SEC were getting everybody. UNC was getting the crumbs. And so they have a team that's a bit undersized. They have a team that's athletic. They've come on in the last month and a half. And I had said I could see a way that they could get in. If they beat Duke in the regular season finale, they've got a good shot. If they don't beat Duke in the regular season finale, they've got to get to the semifinals. Then we find out that they're playing Duke in the semifinals of the ACC tournament. And Cooper Flagg, the best player in the conference, is injured, had sprained his ankle the night before. And we're thinking, okay, this could be the moment that Carolina gets the win that they desperately need. If they get this win, they're in. There are no questions.
And what happened?
Unfortunately, Carolina goes down by about 24 in the first half.
Mm-hmm.
They scratch and claw their way back. They show some fight. If they'd been blown out of this game, that was their season. They were going to the NIT. They scratch and claw their way back. They get within a point. In the last couple seconds of the game-tying free throw by UNC is called off because there is a lane violation. Jalen Withers had fallen into the lane. You're not allowed to stand in the lane during a free throw. And that ultimately made that game-tying free throw null and void. Duke ends up winning by 3 points in that game. So Sunday comes, and what did I text you, Dad, on Sunday during the select? After all of the conference tournaments, so this past weekend is the weekend that every school is playing in their conference tournament, and they all end around 6 o'clock to get ready for prime time for the selection show. And what did I text you? It was about 10 minutes into the show, and what do we see on screen?
You said, wow.
I said, wow, with a bunch of W's, because Carolina is in the NCAA tournament. They were selected. They end up being an 11 seed, and they will play in what is called a play-in game on Tuesday night. So before we get into the bracket, let's talk through the overall selection and all of the fuss from the past 24 hours. It's now been 24 hours since people have been up in arms since Carolina was selected into the NCAA tournament. Okay, so 68 teams make the tournament. Four of them, or advance, or 8 of them will play in a play-in round. So there's 4 games in the play-in round. Those 4 winners go into the 64 teams that continue on. 2 of those games are typically 16 seed versus 16 seed, so those are some of your lesser conferences, not the best teams in the tournament that automatically qualified by winning their conference championship. And then 2 of the games are between 11 seeds. So those are teams that are in tougher conferences that were on the bubble, and they play each other to get into the round of 64. So the way that it works is you have 68 teams get selected. 37 of them are at large. So those are the ones that didn't win their conference tournament. They're the 37 best teams in college basketball. Now, you mentioned the athletic director for UNC, Bubba Cunningham, is the chairperson of the selection committee. But I mentioned earlier, and I'll mention it here again, all of the hoopla I would equate to your average Joe who's just watching the news and gets one piece of the story and they go crazy. College basketball fans, the large share of them, have been getting one piece of the story. Quad 1 wins, quad 1 wins, quad 1 wins. They separate the schedule into quads. Quads 1, 2, 3, and 4. UNC is 1-12 in quad 1 wins. Everyone had been saying they don't deserve to get in because they were 1-12 against the top teams in the country. Now, to kind of just set the scene of this committee, there are 12 members of the committee. They're all athletic directors of colleges, and some of them are commissioners or on the conference, the sports conferences boards. So these are 12 folks that are tied to the universities in some capacity. In an unfortunate turn of events, Carolina, they're typically a 1 or 2 seed, and they're not supposed to be in a play-in game. That a 4 seed is typically low for Carolina, right, Dad?
Yep. Last year they were a 1 seed.
Last year they were a 1 seed. So poor Bubba Cunningham has to go on to every network yesterday and explain why Carolina, and it was mentioned by the committee, was the last team into the committee over some other teams that people have felt were more deserving. Guy was put in a tough spot. I don't envy him.
It was such a tough spot, he didn't do the explaining. He had his second in command come and explain everything.
He looked like his hands were tied behind his back. They had ripped the tape off his mouth just so he could talk while he was on camera, and then they were going to tape it back up and shove him in a chair in the corner. That's what it looked like if you were watching the broadcast.
That's exactly what it looked like.
So
He looked like he was a hostage.
all of these talking heads on every network today, all of these so-called experts, failed to mention to the general public that the committee has 7 metrics as to how they select the 37 at-large teams. Those are the teams that didn't win their conference tournament. The 7 metrics: net, NCAA evaluation tool; Ken Pom, that is named after Ken Pomeroy, who was an analyst. He created this whole metric system about 10, 15 years ago. BPI, the Basketball Power Index; and the Torvik, also named after someone who created a whole analysis to pick the best teams. Those 4 metrics are based on efficiency and strength of schedule. Now, there are 3 other metrics. KPI, named after Ken Palga Index; strength of record; and wins above bubble. These are your wins and losses. So there are 7 metrics. 4 of them are for efficiency and strength of schedule. 3 of them are for wins and losses. Notice I didn't say quad wins in there. So we've been hearing quad wins for the past couple weeks.
Couple weeks, all season.
All season, but particularly in the past couple of weeks, as we're getting down to the nitty-gritty here. And all I've known is that Carolina has not done well against quad 1 teams. But what they failed to mention is all of these other metrics. So, of the teams on the bubble, these are the teams that were being tossed around as the ones that were all around the same level that had to be decided to be the last couple of teams in. So we've got UNC. They finished the season 22-13. They lose in the semifinals to the number 1 team in the country of the ACC tournament. We have West Virginia, 19-13. They lost in the opening game that they played in their conference tournament, the Big 12 conference tournament, to Colorado, the last team in the conference. Ohio State, also on the bubble, 17-15. Lost 5 of their last 7 and had a losing record in their conference in the Big 10. Indiana, this is the one that everyone's up in arms with, 19-13 on the season. Boise State, 24-10. Now, this is the team that I would say has the biggest gripe, because the last 4 teams in were Texas, Xavier, UNC, and San Diego State. Now, Boise State and San Diego State actually had to play in the quarterfinals of the Big West tournament. Guess who won that game? Boise State. So Boise State beat San Diego State. San Diego State gets in. Boise State staying home. Xavier and Texas, the last 4 that got in. So everyone's up in arms about Carolina, okay? Dad, are you with me?
I'm with you.
Now, Dad's over here yawning because we recorded this an hour and a half ago, but he messed things up. So now we have to record it all. So he's heard all of it, and he's over here yawning because I was on one. I was on fire. I was spitting facts. I educated you. You had no idea about any of this stuff.
That's true.
Okay. So we've got UNC that's on the bubble. Everyone's raking them over the coals. Now, let me also tell you this. The SEC gets 14 schools in. 14. The last 6 schools of the top 14 in the SEC that got elected to go to the NCAA tournaments. Texas, one of the last 4 into the tournament. 6-12 in the SEC, 20-13 overall. Oklahoma, 6-12 in the SEC, 20-13 overall. Arkansas, 8-10 in the SEC, 20-13 overall. Vandy, 8-10 in the conference, 20-12 overall. Georgia, 8-10 in the SEC, 20-12 overall. And Mississippi State, 8-10, 21-12 overall. Now, no one's talking about Xavier, who's also one of the last teams in. They were 1-9 in quad 1 wins. Carolina was 1-12. I haven't heard a single thing about Xavier being 1-9 in quad 1 wins. And they lost a day before in their conference tournament than UNC did. Okay, so I bring up these metrics to say I'm about data, right? Like when I'm in a sales pitch, I like to have all the data. I want to know all of the information, and I decide how I'm going to either make the sale or how I'm going to combat objections. Okay? So now, we've talked about this. Now, before we even get into all of these metrics, all this science, all this mathematics that's gone in, now I mentioned 3 of these analyses were done by people in the last 12 to 15 years. Before this, you wouldn't have a team that only got 6 wins in their conference end up in the NCAA tournament. This would be all off of just look and feel. This would not be off of
The eye test.
all of these different metrics,
The eye
right?
test.
This is the seeing eye test, and I will guarantee to you, if you look back in the history, now the tournament's been around since the 30s. If you look back in the history of the NCAA tournament, no team who only won 6 games in their conference tournament and went 6-12, so there were 6 games under 500, got into the NCAA tournament. Okay? So we have 6 teams from the SEC with losing records in their conference all make it into the tournament. I haven't heard a single thing about any of those teams. All right? So now, as we get into some of the math, now all of these metrics that I used earlier, I mentioned quad 1 wins. We all know Carolina only has 1 quad 1 win. But what they failed to realize, the net, UNC is first of the teams on the bubble. They rank 36. Texas is 39. Boise State is 43. Xavier is 45. Colorado State, who's a 12 seed, haven't heard their name. They are 50. San Diego State, 52. San Diego State has worse metrics down the line than Boise State, who's in the same conference that they lost to in their conference championship. Haven't heard a single thing about San Diego State getting in over their conference rival who has better metrics. Indiana, 54. That's the one everyone's talking about. Ken Pom, UNC ranked first out of the bubble teams, 33. Texas, 43. Boise State, 44. Everyone else is in the 40s. BPI, Basketball Power Index. Carolina first out of the teams on the bubble. They're 34. Xavier is 39. Boise State is 48. Colorado State is 54. San Diego State is 53. Indiana is 52. Now I'm going to throw West Virginia in here because West Virginia, the governor of West Virginia, now is all up in arms, wants to, all this legal action. The net, they're 51. Carolina's 36. The Ken Pom, Carolina's 33. West Virginia's 52. The BPI that I mentioned, Carolina's 26. They're 48. Strength of record, Carolina's 36. West Virginia's 43. Wins above bubble, Carolina's 42, and so is West Virginia. Now they're 6-10 in quad 1 wins, but they also went 10-10 in the Big 12, so they have a 500 record in their conference. So these are the types of things that no one's talking about. And all these metrics, Carolina is first of the teams on the bubble, with the exception of the KPI, where they're 6th. I haven't heard a single thing about that today.
Nope. And I haven't heard anything about any of that stuff in 3 months. All they were talking about was quad 1 wins. And I'm watching games day in and day out, and that's why I have people so upset. And this is what they do with everything. They don't give people the full story. People get half the story, and people are jumping out of windows.
So this is why you got to look at the data. And this whole selection process has become more and more scientific over the past 10 years with all of these different indexes. Carolina deserves to get in. Not only do they deserve to get in, they deserve to get in over other teams that aren't even in playoff games or in playing games. So, I need everyone to just shut up because Carolina's in whether you like it or not. And I was even looking at something, I saw something that, and I'm not even going to use names, but I saw a commentator say Carolina and Texas are in because they're big schools, and that just goes to the NCAA. They're all about the ratings and about the betting and all of this stuff. And I'm not the first person to high five the NCAA, okay? Like, I'm not going to be wearing NCAA gear, and I'm not in the fan club. But when you're talking about schools like Indiana who are out, they also have a big fan base. Newsflash. Ohio State also has a big fan base. Newsflash. So we're talking about all these West Virginia, big fan base. Newsflash. So now we're just making up theories left and right. And it like they don't even make sense if you actually look at all of the numbers. But then you also look at these schools and these fan bases. None of these arguments even make sense.
Well, they had people turned upside down, and they're going to probably be like that all week until they start playing games, because that's what they do. And some of the people, especially on ESPN, should know better because they have access to the information.
Now, you had said, and I'd even said, seen things like Bubba Cunningham and no athletic director should be on the committee. And it's like, then who do you put on the committee? Because the committee are people who are
I would put retired coaches.
Retired coaches are affiliated with schools. Everyone has an affiliation to somewhere.
But at least the retired coaches know the game. A lot of these athletic directors, the athletic director's more of a business position. Sure. They know some sports, but they don't know the game like a retired coach would know it.
Absolutely. But to say that that's the reason why Carolina got in is ridiculous, because every retired coach is going to be affiliated to a school. Some of them are rivals of other schools. You know, do you want this to be like the BCS back in the day? This is why we have the college football playoffs. Do you want the boogeyman making the decisions, or do you want, someone who's some level of awareness of what's going on in college basketball? Because clearly all the people who are complaining don't have any awareness of what's going on in college basketball.
That's true. And they get paid a lot of money to cover it.
Right. And
a lot of
guys
money.
Guys who went to Duke, who went to other schools, all complaining about UNC. And I got to tell you, I'm not going to call out all the names, but Joe Lunardi, last couple weeks, I've been looking at the bracketology to figure out how UNC was going to get in. And that bracketology, man, he got that wrong.
Yep. Well, he admitted, I think, late Saturday night, I really don't know what's going to happen. Wait a second. You've been posting this stuff, updating it every 2 hours, and now you're saying you don't know what's going to go on? Oh, man. This is...
So, enough is enough. But here's the thing. I don't care what any of these bums are saying. You know why? Because UNC is in the NCAA tournament, and they're playing on Tuesday night, regardless of what the experts think. So should we talk about the bracket, Dad?
Go ahead, talk about it.
Because I can find a way. Now, we mentioned this. San Diego State arguably shouldn't have gotten in because Boise State should be in.
San Diego State 2 years ago was in the Final Four.
San Diego State 2 years ago, UNC 3 years ago was in the Final Four. So
championship game.
Right. So I could see a way that UNC wins this game. It's not out of the realm of possibilities. And then I'm looking, and all they have to do is get past Ole Miss. And then as I look a little bit further, then they just need to get past the winner of Iowa State and Lipscomb, which is likely going to be Iowa State. And then the news that comes out that Iowa State's best player is out for the whole tournament. And then I'm like, okay, well, you go ahead with this. What was your theory as you continue to go on?
You could get crazy. You could say, okay, they'll beat Iowa State. I left my paper downstairs.
Now, the next game would potentially be against Michigan State.
Well, they lost to Michigan State in overtime in Maui.
And then if they get past Michigan State, they would probably play Auburn, could be in there.
Well, they got blown out by Auburn in Maui. Auburn's lost 3 of their last 4 games. They're not really on the upswing. They're primed for getting upset somewhere in here. And that could be that. They could be.
And then So that's the South region.
Right.
Now, UNC could get out of the South region. They would play the winner of the West region. And that could potentially be Florida.
And they only lost to Florida by like 3 or 4 points in Charlotte earlier in the year. They should have won that game.
So then if they beat Florida,
Then
they could be in the national championship
against Duke,
game.
a team they've lost to 3 times already this year. Very hard to beat a team 4 times in a row. They could be the national championship swept. I can't even say that with a straight face.
It is quite funny. I mean, they say you should fill out 3 brackets. You should fill out one in 60 seconds with no thought whatsoever. You should fill out one where you use all these metrics and you're doing all the research and trying to figure out the who's actually going to win, and then one where you just follow your heart. And if you just follow your heart, I could see a way where they end up at the Final Four at least.
Okay. Yeah. You got a big heart.
I said that they were going to be in if they got to the semis of the ACC tournament. Okay, so Dad, speaking of the Final Four, who do you have in your Final Four?
Florida.
I think you said Michigan State.
Michigan State, Duke, and who's the
Did
other?
you say Clemson?
Clemson. Yeah, Clemson's good. Clemson's the only team in the ACC to beat Duke this year.
So then who do you have? Then it would be Duke playing Clemson on one side of the bracket.
Then I have
Florida
Duke
playing
and
Michigan
Florida in the championship game with Florida winning it.
Well, I like Florida. Florida's hot right now. They just won the SEC conference tournament. Duke, I think, is the number 1 team in the country. Of the 4 seeds, they say Auburn is the top seed in the bracket, but I really think that it's Duke. And then Houston, I haven't watched too much of the Big 12, but Houston's been ranked high all season long. So
They're good.
They're a good team, and they've been good for the past couple of years.
Yep.
I have to give it more time. But we are going to do a bracket challenge. We're going to do a Dad and Swebb bracket challenge. So we're going to put up the link on social media. Make sure to fill out your bracket. You have until Thursday afternoon because normally they don't include the playing games, although I'm going to put mine in tonight or maybe tomorrow morning. I likely will have Carolina going a round or 2. So I could be at a disadvantage before the brackets are completely locked on Thursday, but I'm just going to follow my heart on that. And I've been watching them all season, and I know that is a dumb thing to do because they can only put together about 25 minutes of good gameplay. But hey, those 25 minutes, they could beat anyone. So
That's true.
So we'll see what's going to happen here. But join us. It's all for bragging rights. You know our secrets. You know what we're thinking. So, you could decide to go with what we're picking or you can go with other ones. I think it's wide open. I'd love to see some SEC teams get knocked out, some of these losing records. I'd love to see Carolina win a few rounds and just shut people up. So they're playing for bragging rights. They're playing for pride is on the line. The last time pride was on the line in the ACC semis, they didn't get off the bus until after halftime. So we'll see. We'll see what's going to happen here. But it's going to be an exciting week because there's nothing better than some March Madness.
That's true. And then piggybacking that, in about a week and a half, baseball season starts.
10 days at the time of filming, 9 days by the time everyone sees this until opening day. The Brewers go to New York. They play the Yankees March 27th, which seems so early. It feels like it's going to be cold at the game, but opening day for the Yankees at Yankee Stadium is March 27th. We're going to keep it positive because we've already gone back and forth about the metrics and all the talking heads all over college sports. So we're not going to talk about the Knicks and the way that they play against West Coast teams and the fact that Jalen Brunson's out for another 1 or 2 weeks. But Dad, do you want to leave the people with a tip of the week? Dad, tip of the week.
Tip of the week. So it doesn't have to come down. Take care of business ahead of time so you don't have to wait until the last minute. If you're in school, study. Don't wait until the last minute to take a test, to cram for a test. If you're putting together a basketball roster, put it together before the season starts so you don't have to sit here and complain and bite your fingernails about being on the bubble and look at all kinds of metrics to get into the tournament. This has been unbelievable.
Listen, open up the purse strings. Let's start there. Like, if you want to build a roster, open up the purse strings. That's why the SEC has 14 schools in, because they're spending money. So UNC needs to follow that. But before we worry about that, I think we could have some fun this weekend. We're playing with house money.
Oh, and Swebb, I'm going to go to my first concert, aside from concerts that you guys had when you were in school. My first concert in my life this coming week in Nashville, Tennessee, at the Grand Ole Opry. And the night before, I'm going to see my man, one of my guys, Tyler, perform in Nashville.
What concert are you seeing at the Grand Ole Opry?
A country concert.
Do you even know who you're seeing?
No, I never heard of people.
Well, do you even know how to spell concert?
Swebb,
do you know what a concert is?
When I walk into a venue with seats and people, I'm always looking for a scoreboard.
You know there's no scoreboard in the venue. There are
know. That's
sticks or balls or...
There's no sticks, balls,
hoops,
nothing.
Nets.
Hoops, nets, nothing. Goalpost. What are you going to do? It's my first concert, Swebb.
Well, I can't wait to hear about it. I'm so curious as to who you're seeing.
It's going to be 2 concerts, 2 nights in a row. My man on Thursday night and Grand Ole Opry on Friday night.
Okay, well, you know the Carolina, if they win, they play on Friday around 4:40. What time's the concert?
The game's going to be 4:40?
Yes.
Oh. The concert's at 7.
Okay. Let's hope
no problem.
They stay on schedule.
No problem.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us today. Round 2. Dad just barely stayed awake. You know, it's fun when he can't tack together 2 strong recordings in one night.
It's tough. Maybe I'll get some sleep during one of those concerts.
Okay.
Do you think it'll be loud in there?
Yeah, I think it will, and I think no one's going to the concert to hear your snoring.
Well, if it's real loud, they're not going to
awake.
hear my snoring.
Okay, try and stay awake.
I'll try.
But that concludes this week's episode of Dad and Swebb Talk Sports. Be sure to follow us at Dad and Swebb on Instagram and X. Subscribe on YouTube and Rumble, and share this episode with a friend. We will see you next week.
So long.
Thank you for tuning in to Dad and Swebb Talk Sports, the show where we cover all of our favorite sports moments from the past week. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube and Rumble, and follow us at Dad and Swebb on Instagram and X. See you next week.